Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming. My name is Olo and it's time to talk about an important aspect of combat: Ashes of War. For some reason, I've never actually discussed them in a video, and as someone who's now made a few tier lists, it's one that I've never made, so we're going to do that today. I put together what I consider the strongest 15 and compared them against one another. So this is a tier list of the ones I consider best and most relevant, rather than a list of every Ash in the game. And to be specific, this is about Ashes of War, not weapon arts that you find on unique weapons like Waterfowl Dance found on Melania's Blade. And it's a list focused on offensive Ashes of War, ones that deal damage or enhance your damage compared to, say, utility or defense only. With that said, let's begin. I will begin with the S tier rankings because it's going to help me contextualize the ones as we go down the list. We have S, A, B, and C grades. So starting with S grade, I'm just going to get it out of the way. Seppuku is probably the best Ash of War in the entire game. Not only does it enhance the bleed buildup of your weapon while you use it, but it also improves your attack power, which is further improved with bleed builds when you're using the Talisman or the White Mask Helm. It leads to just outrageously effective bleed buildup. 1 or 2 hits and you'll see a blood proc. It remains ridiculously strong, even if it does take a moment to apply and also cost you a small amount of health. I think it's fair to say that it remains the strongest Ash of War in the game. Now, another S tier Ash of War, I think, is going to be Lion's Claw here, giving you a nice flip, very gut style, perfect for your big colossal swords, eh? But mechanically, it's insanely effective. You get hyper armor, you deal a load of damage, and you also do stagger damage. So you can literally, quite effectively, spam this Ash of War over and over and over on a target with your hyper armor, dealing huge damage, watch them stagger, get the critical, follow that with another Lion's Claw, and it's just ridiculously strong. In PvP, same thing. You can be throwing out a combo, look for a trade, and then use the hyper armor to trade directly with this. As an Ash of War, it's super effective, looks really cool, feels good to use. It's S tier. And there's another Ash of War that is very familiar, very similar in what it does and how effective it actually is. That's Giant's Hunt. Much like Lion's Claw, it's going to work really well on a colossal weapon, but it does go on a nice variety of weapons actually. The idea is dashing forward and striking upwards to deal a nice burst of damage. Often that'll launch an enemy into the air, which can then be followed up by another Giant's Hunt while they get up. PvE wise, big damage, also staggering. Much like Lion's Claw, it works similar. In PvP builds, you'll see players run, say, the sleep arrows or bolts on the pulley crossbow, put someone to sleep real quick, and then follow up with a Giant's Hunt, dealing stupid damage. It's interesting, they're basically the same Ash of War in terms of why you're using it and likely how you're using it, and they're both stupidly strong, Lion's Claw and Giant's Hunt. Here's a different Ash of War, also in S tier though, the Flame of the Red Mains. This is a close to medium range fire wave you send out that'll deal both great fire damage and stagger enemies, including bosses. So unlike Lion's Claw and unlike Giant's Hunt, you have a medium to close range sort of shotgun wave blast. This is of course insanely effective against enemies weak to fire and awesome against any that it can stagger, which is most. This is a wonderfully effective Ash of War in PvE, but still nice in PvP because yeah, it's got that little bit of range people often don't expect it. So it's another one that I think is undisputably one of the best Ashes of War in the game. Next up for S tier though is our last pick. Royal Knight's Resolve is one that's going to enhance your damage, as one of the only ones that you could consider less literal damage to begin with. You apply it and then for roughly 8 seconds your weapon will glow a sort of white, and the next blow that you use will have enhanced damage. This is interesting because double hit heavy attacks, for example, they'll get both of those hits enhanced, but it's best shown on the Giant's Crusher, that big colossal hammer that can do the most damage in one hit. This is a Ash of War that's key to that, landing these ridiculous hits in one hit. You can't really do it without Royal Knight's Resolve. Since it only takes a moment to apply and lasts a reasonable amount of time with 8 seconds, you're going to be able to get the hit off every time. So you could literally put on the Resolve, attack, put it on, do another attack, put it on, do another attack, working stupidly strong in PvE. You still see it in PvP sometimes when someone's looking to enhance an attack, since again, the animation's short, but it's more of a PvE ability, that's for sure. But now we come down to the A rating. This is difficult because these are really, really strong Ashes of War, but they have some kind of criticism that I can give to it, such as Sword's Dance, which can go on a surprising variety of weapons with its name literally saying sword. It's just a double spin attack that can be great in, say, PvP, where you're doing a trade, maybe you're in the middle of a combo, you're now in a vulnerable moment, and you just throw that out and trade with it. Because it's got a bit of hyper armor, you're able to do that, but then also the damage is going to be great. Essentially, it's great for continuing a combo. Say in PvE, you could be in the middle of an attack, whether it's just a heavy, a jumping, or maybe a light attack combo, and follow it up, leading to a really nice burst of damage ended with this Ash of War. I guess why I put it as an A rating, maybe the top A rating, is because it's generally going to do less damage than the insane capabilities of, say, Seppuku, Lion's Claw, Giant's Hunt, or otherwise. I see it fairly often in PvP, but if I see, say, Giant's Hunt, I know I can't get hit by that, whereas I can survive a Sword's Dance. Next up, we have one that I'm going to compare immediately to another, just to break the routine a little bit. Firstly, it's Piercing Fang, an A-grade Ash of War in my opinion, because it takes only a moment to charge up and then you dash forward with a very, very powerful strike. This is meant to be an unblockable attack as well, so shields aren't really going to stop this thing. In PvE, that means you can use it from medium to close range and deal big damage. You could do a combo and then follow it up, much like you do with Sword Dance, and it gives you a simple but very effective way to fight at medium range with any weapon it can go on. Occasionally I'll see this in PvP, and much like Giant's Hunt, I'll need to really respect it because I do not want to get hit by that thing. Sure, it does a bit less damage, but it comes out quicker, and that's why maybe it's so threatening. It's very comparable to another Ash of War though, which I'm going to put in B grade right under it. Impaling Thrust is basically the same thing. You charge up an attack and then dash forward with a sort of thrusting attack. The difference here is it does slightly less damage than Piercing Fang, and that alone is why I need to put it in like a lower tier. In its description, it can pierce an enemy's guard, just the same as Fang, and it can stagger enemies, just as Fang can as well. But yeah, they're weirdly similar Ashes of War, and they go on mostly the same weapons, but one of them does slightly more damage than the other, and that's why I've got Piercing Fang in the A grade and Impaling Thrust in the B grade. Now, another Ash of War that I really like, that I really am struggling to put in A or B, whether I want it in one or the other, is Beast Roar. I'm putting it in A grade because I do think it's a really effective Ash of War in pretty much any build. Shooting out this roar at really good range to deal good damage, and you can spam it. What's interesting about this Ash of War is, as a ranged Ash of War, it can be enhanced in various ways we've discovered recently. With Blood Flame Blade, the incantation, or Black Flame Blade, the incantation, you can kind of augment an Ash of War like this to then have the Black Flame properties or even bleed build up from range. That's why I take it from a B rating to an A rating, because that's really effective. In PvE content, the Black Flame is going to do more damage based on what health pool the enemy has, so a boss has more health. And even if it hits a target when they're rolling in PvP, the dot will still apply and do a nice bit of damage. If someone's trying to do an incantation or a spell, you could just interrupt them with a Beast Roar. So I really like that Ash of War, and that's why I put it as an A grade, though I think maybe it could be in B. Speaking of B grade though, I'm going to put Glintblade Phalanx, which is quite similar in its design or why I would use it, but I'm putting it in a B compared to an A. Much like Beast Roar, it can be enhanced by Blood Flame or Black Flame for the same purposes. Probably better with the Blood Flame because it's got 4 swords that are able to build up that bleed build up on a target much more effectively. The problem is the damage is much lower than, say, Beast Roar, and where Beast Roar can be sent out and instantly deal damage, this one needs to be applied, then after a moment, when you're in a certain range, it goes off at that point. That's still a good thing, especially with trading in PvP. You don't necessarily want it to come out at once. If you stagger it by placing this, then run in with an attack while the blades go at the target at the same time, it's very hard for them to avoid it, and you can base some builds around it like we have done on the channel recently. But it does less damage and it requires more setup, so I put it as a tier below Beast Roar. Now, what about one of the coolest Ashes of War in the game? Phantom Slash is super cool. Summon a ghost that jumps ahead and attacks for you, then you dash next to it and do your own attack, which can then be followed up with a combo of a second ghost and second attack, which is super cool and very effective when used correctly. This is a nice medium or even close range trading tool in PvP. You can harass the target at surprising distance, then close in on them. In the middle of a combo, you can just throw it out and surprise someone. Maybe they're trying to do an incantation or a spell, and you can interrupt them with it, and it's solid damage too. The problem is it's a bit awkward to aim and it does leave you vulnerable if you miss it. I would say it's more common people are going to run away or try to avoid it, but those who understand it know there is that window of opportunity if they can avoid the hits. Still, it's effective when used well. It just has that issue of leaving you vulnerable when used incorrectly. Now here's one that just barely makes it into B grade for me. This is Bloody Slash. This Ash of War has great damage and solid range, and it can even get through guards and has a really low FP cost. On top of that, it's a bleed build-up Ash of War. So, because bleed's so broken in this game, you'd think it'd be an incredible Ash of War and one of the best, right? Well, it is if it's on this list, I suppose, but I put it lower than the rest so far because it costs a lot of health to use. When you spam this out, which you often will because it is a very strong Ash of War doing great damage, and with that good range, and with the bleed build up, you want to use it a lot, which costs you a lot of health to use. If you trade with it, maybe you get a bit of damage off, but you take damage and you hurt yourself. So as much as I like it, as effective as it does cost a lot of health and it's risky to use in PvP. You could argue it's one of the best early game Ashes of War though. In a brand new playthrough, you can run to the castle where this is at Fort Hate, grab it very quickly and really rely on it for most of the playthrough. So I do think it's one of the best Ashes of War, but it has some clear downsides, obviously. Now we come to the final tier, C tier picks. Let's begin with Hoarfrost Stomp. Well, it was an insane Ash of War, but it's a sort of shadow of its former self. A close to medium range stomp that blows up in ice under the target. It's really cool because it can go through terrain, you can AoE packs with it, and combo with it. It does frost damage, so that's obviously going to be great against those weak to frost, but it's down in C grade now because the damage is greatly reduced and the animation speed is really slow. It used to be stupidly fast and it was sort of the #1 Ash of War to use for speedrunners, and that's probably why it got nerfed. By reducing the damage and the speed of the animation, they were able to make it a lot more fair, but they may have gone a bit far with it. I do think the damage is a bit lacking these days, spending all your FP to do what could have been done with another Ash of War more effectively. I still think it's good though, especially against enemies weak to frost. Another Ash of War that used to be insane but has now been nerfed and I put into C grade is the Glintstone Pebble. Previously outrageously strong, now it's just fine. You used to be able to just simply spam the Pebble and stagger enemies infinitely, very silly, and then you can do the follow-up attack for big burst and even better stagger, leading to critical hits. These days, not so much. The Pebble part does the same damage, but it's the follow-up that seems to deal much less damage. More importantly, the stagger values of both are greatly reduced. The Pebble is not really staggering anymore, which is probably fair, is a bit silly. The follow-up is staggering, but the issue is you must throw the Pebble, then throw out the heavy attack, which comes out a bit slow, and as you can see in this footage, that can be a bit awkward and easy to interrupt. In PvP, you used to be able to throw out this Pebble, which would stagger someone, and then guarantee the follow-up of the heavy attack, which could even one-shot people. It was a bit strong. Now it's just a nice early game Ash of War which you can get in Stormveil Keep, but certainly not what it once was. But for our 15th and last Ash of War, I want to talk about Spectral Lance, which is another cool Ash of War, but I just think it's a bit lacking in terms of damage. You turn your thrusting weapon into this lance and then throw it. It's got really good range, and the speed at which it flies through the air is very impressive. So you can accurately throw it at targets, say trolls or dragons or giants, aiming at their heads or the critical spots, which will lead to a stagger and then a critical hit. It does about half the damage of a normal hit, say if you using your actual weapon, and it's a longer cast animation compared to say just spamming R1s, so lower in DPS. However, I think it's good utility in a build because if you are against an enemy with a weak spot like say the dragons, you can spam that out and reap the rewards, taking a really difficult enemy into something much more manageable. Plus just finishing off a target easily with a sudden throw, or in PvP interrupting a spell. There's clear purpose to this Ash of War. If it did a bit more damage or perhaps had a faster animation, I would rate it higher, but I still think it's pretty damn good, and that's why it's on this list. But there you have it, our 15 top Ashes of War in my opinion, and them rated against each other. Are there any that I've missed that could have been included on this list? And would you rearrange it at all? Let me know. It's weird, I don't know why it took me so long to talk about Ashes of War, but it's nice to finally do it. I got to test some ones that I've not used that much before. And if you do enjoy these tier list videos, actually, leave a like so we can keep making more, and maybe leave a suggestion on a future topic for one. But now though, I've been Hollow, you've been you, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.